Keeping blood circulating makes the brain healthier and the body stronger. That's coming from a medical student, not yet. But yes, with this, we have a lecture next. So let's make sure we're all focused. We spent a lot of energy, so now our body is nice and ready to sit in more hibernation mode. That doesn't mean sleep, it's a nice in-between. It's a nice in-between, definitely. So, let us give each other a high five and say, we're still being good people! Good people!
I'm troubled.
Now, we have a lecture where we're going to learn more about. So we saw the beginning. We saw a bit more than the beginning, which was upside down. And now we have to see how things climb back. So with that, let us invite our next lecturer, Munhee.
Fantastic.
Good.
Who was the best player?
Kai.
I think no one. Yeah. Okay. So this time I would like to talk about the topic of restoration of Heavenly Parents' dream. Then last time we learned about the human form, right? Then at the end of the lectures, we came to one set conclusion: that God's dream was broken. And God lost his children to Satan, and his dream of living happily together with them was destroyed. But would God really give up on the lost children and the dream?
No.
No, right? So before we begin this lecture on God's providence of salvation, I want to share one thought with you. So many of you have probably seen movies about the kidnapping. So sadly the kidnapping happens all over the world. And then even today, the missing child is reported somewhere in the world every 4 seconds. So that's why so many movies are made about this subject. Then here is the common thread, and as you can see the parents' eyes. Parents never give up on their children. So in the same way, God, our Heavenly Parent, never gave up on human beings after the fall. Like a loving parent, God has continued his work of salvation throughout history to bring his children back. So that is the topic of this lecture. It's not the story of the gods who judge sinners. It is the story of the parents who never stopped searching for his lost children. Yeah, so because of this, today's lecture will include many stories from the Bible, almost like reading a history book. So if you are not familiar with the Bible, some parts may seem a little long, but I will do my best to make the story interesting. Then, of course, my English is not enough, and then time is not enough to share about this whole story in the 40 minutes. So I need help about that point. If someone couldn't get that much about the Bible story, so you can ask to next to you then about more details. Okay, so let's start. So first, let's remember the dream of our Heavenly Parents that we learned about in the first lecture Lisa gave. God's dream was to raise one man and one woman who would each represent him on earth, the only begotten son and only begotten daughter. So they would become true parents. And then through them, God's children would be born, and God would live with them forever in love. So that love would grow from the family to society and the nation, then finally to the whole world. Was the God's purpose of the creation. But as we learned in Lecture 2, the things did not happen according to God's dream. The human beings fell. So instead of becoming the true parents created on God, the Adam and Eve became false parents centered on Satan. As a result, humanity did not live within the God's bloodline, but within the Satan's bloodline. So from God's point of view, God had lost his own children. So the providence of salvation is not simply about forgiving sins. It is about bringing God's lost children back into his embrace. Even more than that, it is about completing the one human family that God dreamed of from the very beginning. So that is the true meaning of the providence of salvation. And then at this point, yeah, I was thinking about this point when I study about these things. So even games have a reset button. Why didn't God simply create new human beings? Have you ever thought about these questions? Yeah, several times. Then at first, it may seem like the easiest solution, but if we think about the parents don't do that. Very simple. If a child does not listen to them, would loving the parents throw that child away and have another one instead? Of course not. No matter how much the trouble their child causes, the parents continue to love them and wait for them to come back. Our Heavenly Parents is the same. That is why God never gave up on humanity. Then there's another reason as well. God is the one who the beginning and the end are always the same. So the purpose he set at the creation never changed. So if he began with the goal of building the kingdom of heaven and earth, he will surely finish by achieving that goal. So instead of creating new people, God chose to restore fallen people and raise them back to the place where they were originally meant to be. Okay, then how did God restore human beings to their original position? Here is the important part. Everything works according to God's principles. Even in the dark world, God's rules do not change. So the salvation works the exact same way. So when people survive the big crisis or the hard time, they often say I've been born again. In the same way, we need the rebirth to parents to be saved. So to make this happen, God sent the only begotten Son and the only begotten daughter on this earth. But however, there was one big difference. This work has to be done in the fallen world. Then the people living in the fallen world were not yet ready to receive the God's children. So before sending the only begotten Son and daughter, God first has to prepare the right environment. So think about the parents who are expecting a baby. What do they do before the baby is born? They prepared all things that the baby will need. And then they can grow well. So Heavenly Parents did also same thing. Just he prepared the world through 6 stages before creating human beings. He also had to prepare the world before sending the only begotten Son and daughter. And then also he needs people who would be ready to receive them. So this preparation took 4,000 years. But how could God prepare such an environment in the fallen world? So although this world became evil because of the fall, there have always been people who were guided by their conscience and searched for God. So what do we usually call system that gather people to pursue their beliefs like this? Yes, that's the answer.
Wow.
Religion. Yes, each religion teaches the truth in its own way and has its own character. But because of God is our parent of all people, He did not limit expressing himself within only the one religion. So just as every child has a different personality, God established different religions adapted for different peoples and cultures. Then through them, He was guide people, love them, and help them grow their conscience and spirituality. Okay, but however, among all these people, God needs one nation that would understand His providence clearly and take responsibility for His work. Yeah. If we compare it to the military, God needs the special units that could carry out an important mission. So we can see this idea in many religious scriptures, but it is explained most clearly, specific in the Bible. So throughout the Bible, God chooses the central figures, and then through them, He prepared the foundation to receive the only begotten Son. Then through the family line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, that we talk about our team 4 before the previous lecture, the discussion time. Yeah. And then God established the people of Israel. Then through many generations of faith, He prepared the foundation to welcome the Jesus. But we can think, why did God have to wait for 4,000 years? Why is too long? Because preparing the world to receive His Son was not an easy task in the fallen world. So finally, when everything was ready, God sent the only begotten Son, Jesus, to the earth. So Jesus came to begin again the mission of the true parents that Adam and Eve had failed to fulfill. And then He came to restore humanity as God's children once more. And this was the beginning of the providence of salvation that our Heavenly Parent had prepared for 4,000 years. Okay, so now we need to ask these two very important questions. So what did the birth of the only begotten Son mean? And then what was the Jesus' mission? So only when we understand these answers can we truly understand the meaning of the cross and the resurrection. Okay, so first, what did the birth of the only begotten Son mean? Generally, if we can think, when a baby is born, the couple finally becomes a parent. The name is changed. So based on this idea, the only begotten Son represents the masculine side of God. So therefore, when Jesus came as the only begotten Son, it means that the new era had opened. Then an era where the God could finally appear to the world as a father. And then, on the other hand, the birth of the only begotten daughter represents the feminine side of the God. This means, God can now appear as a mother. Okay, so let's look at this more closely. God was not first known as our parent. Throughout history, the people's understanding of God continued to grow step by step. So at first, people saw God only as someone to fear. Then they could not speak to him like freely. They simply offered the sacrifices, and then just as a servant serves his master. And then later, during the age of the law, God allowed people to relate to him by keeping his commandments. And then just as citizens obeyed to the laws of their king, people have served God by following his law. So, but it was never the relationship God truly wanted. God did not want the relationship of a master and servant, and then king and people. God wanted the relationship of parents and child. So that's why Jesus, the Son of God, came, and then Jesus lived closer to God than anyone else. So he also began teaching the people to call the Father. So for the people of the time, this was the revolutionary messages. So for the first time in history, people heard that the human beings could become the God's children. Then but there's something else we need to think about. One step more. Our heavenly parents did not plan to send only the only begotten Son. Just as the God's original plan in the creation was to establish both the only begotten Son and only begotten daughter together, the providence of salvation was also meant to be completed by the both of them. So if the only begotten Son would reveal the Heavenly Father, then only begotten daughter would reveal the Heavenly Mother. So when the two become one as two parents, only then could the heavenly parents be fully revealed before humanity in the physical form. This was God's dream. Then, why was the only begotten daughter not sent during Jesus' time? We can think about it. Yeah, why couldn't God send the only begotten daughter in Jesus' time? So women were often treated more like property than as individuals when we think about the society at the time. So it was almost impossible for women to stand at the center of God's work and be accepted by society. And even if God had sent the only begotten daughter, there would have been no foundation to protect her. So God, the first, sent the only begotten Son, and his hope was that after people build a strong foundation of faith around Jesus, the world would become ready to receive the only begotten daughter as well. Then there was another reason. If we think about the Bible, John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." So for 4,000 years, humanity had been waiting for the Messiah who would save them. And the people cried out in the middle of war and suffering, praying for the day when their pain would finally finish, end. As this verse tells us, God could no longer ignore their desperate prayers. Because he loved humanity, he could not wait any longer. So he had to send his Son. Then from that moment on, the responsibility was placed on God's chosen people to receive and protect the Messiah. Okay, then what mission was given to Jesus, the only begotten Son? As we have already learned, Jesus' mission was to fulfill the Heavenly Parents' dream. very simple. And then God's dream was for the only begotten son and only begotten daughter to become husband and wife and then stand together as the true parents. Then through the true parents, the God's true children would be born and God would live with them like forever. So therefore, Jesus' mission was to meet the only begotten daughter, become the true parents, restore fallen people as God's children, and establish a life centered on the heavenly parent here on earth. Okay, but there's something important to remember. So Jesus cannot be a king without his people. Jesus could not fulfill God's dream by himself alone. And then the path of the true parents could never be complete by one person alone. So Jesus needs people who believe in him and protect him and help him to complete his mission. So that's why our heavenly parents prepared many central figures before Jesus was born. So the responsibility of the central figures can be divided into two parts. First one was to prepare for Jesus' birth. And then second was to help Jesus complete his mission after he was born. Okay, let's see that. Okay, there's one important fact the most understand. Yeah. So Jesus came into a world ruled by Satan. So Satan would never welcome the birth of Jesus, right? So instead, he would see Jesus as the greatest threat and do everything possible to stop God's plan. So that's why so many obstacles appeared. Then Mary, the Jesus' mom, became pregnant with Jesus through the work of the Holy Spirit. But according to the law of that time, the unmarried woman who became pregnant could be stoned to death. And then the King Herod, the king at the time, also heard that the Messiah had been born. So fearing that he would lose his throne, he ordered every boy under 2 years old to be killed. So because of these dangers, Mary has no choice but to give birth to Jesus in the stable. So Jesus was not born in the beautiful palace, and then he was not welcomed with honor by the world. The Son of God, whom God had prepared for 4,000 years, was born in one of the humblest place on earth. So this shows us how unprepared the world still was to receive the only begotten Son. Then even so, through the absolute faith of the central figures, our heavenly parents protected Jesus and then safely brought him into the world. Okay, then what was the second responsibility? The responsibility to support his mission until the end. This was their most important responsibility actually. So in any piece of work, finishing well is the most important part. I really think so. So otherwise, the God's dream could once again be delayed or broken. But sadly, although they believed in Jesus' birth, they did not fully understand who Jesus truly was or what missions he had come to fulfill. Yeah, so this one is the one clear example of the John the Baptist. When John baptized Jesus in the Jordan River, here, God declared, "This is my beloved Son." Then after hearing this, John boldly testified before the people that Jesus was the Son of God. But then later he sent people to ask, are you the one who is to come? Suddenly, so why did this happen? Yeah, it goes very well. But, so John believed that Jesus was the Messiah, but he did not understand what the Messiah had come to accomplish. So if John had continued to testify about Jesus until the end, what might have happened? At the time, John, the influence among the Jewish people was tremendous. So many more people would have followed Jesus. Then perhaps the Jesus ministry would not have ended after only 33 years. So instead, John led many others to doubt as well. The Jewish people who had been prepared to receive Jesus turned against him. And then rather than protecting him, they opposed him, and then Jesus has to work the much more difficult task. Yeah, there was the John's example, and then the second one is Mary. She also struggled to understand Jesus' mission. So this one is when Jesus was 12 years old, he stayed behind at the temple in Jerusalem. Mary and Joseph searched for him for 3 days before finally finding him there. Then at the time, Mary scolded him like this. But Jesus answered, why were you searching for me? Did not know that I must be in the Father's house. These were not simply words spoken to the parents. They revealed Jesus' sorrow. Then Mary believed in the miracle of Jesus' birth, of course, but she still did not fully understand why he had come. If she has truly understood his mission, then she would not have been searching everywhere for him. She would already have known where he needs to be. So whenever I read these two stories, I think they reveal one of the greatest problems of faith, not only in Jesus' time, but even today. So many people believe they know God, and then they believe they follow Him. And then yet, even today, people fight wars because of their religion. So when we look at our words, honestly, it is difficult to say that the humanity is truly living according to God's will. And perhaps this is one of the most important questions we must continue to ask throughout our lives. Okay, so in the end, the central figures, the Jewish people and even the disciples failed to understand Jesus' mission was to become the true parents. So because of this, the foundation to welcome the only begotten daughter was never prepared. And the very people who should have fulfilled Heavenly Parents' dream together ended up leaving Jesus all alone. And so Jesus has to work the path of the cross by himself, the path he never wanted. Yes, should remember something important. Jesus' prayer before the cross shows us that the cross was not our Heavenly Parents' original dream. So before his arrest, Jesus prayed in the Garden of the Gethsemane, Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. So what did Jesus mean when he prayed, let this cup pass from me? We can think about this point. Like, was he simply afraid of dying, like the disciples who abandoned him? No. So Jesus knew our Heavenly Parents' dream more clearly than anyone else because he was the God's direct son. So if God's original plan has truly been for Jesus to die on the cross, Jesus would not have prayed 3 times asking if this could pass from him, no matter how painful it is. And Jesus was not afraid of death. And rather than thinking about his own life, he was thinking about God's sorrow. So he knew how deeply God would suffer by losing his son once again. And he also knew how much suffering this nation would face after his death. Not this time. So that's why he prayed so earnestly before God 3 times. And then, while praying in Gethsemane, Jesus asked 3 of his disciples to pray with him. But even at that moment, they could not share his heart. Then instead, they fell asleep. So at the same time, Judah betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, and then Jesus was arrested. Yet even in the middle of all the betrayal, just Jesus prayed, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So the people around him did not understand the Heavenly Parents' dream or his will. So everything they were doing should never have happened. And even so, until his very last breath, Jesus conformed our Heavenly Parents as God's Son. Then he continued to love all humanity and remain faithful to his place as the only begotten Son. So this is the heart of Jesus, what we find throughout the scriptures. Okay, the difference between Adam and Jesus, this raises the questions. Having lost his only begotten Son, must God now wait another 4,000 years, just as he did in the time of Adam? So here we find the important difference. When Adam failed, both his body and his heart turned away from God. But Jesus was different. Although his body was taken by Satan through the cross, his heart never belonged to Satan. So until the very end, he continued praying to God and remained completely faithful to him. So because of this, although the roots of sin still remained in humanity, Jesus made it possible to the disciple to experience spiritual rebirth through the spiritual resurrection. So this become the beginning of Christian history. So yeah, in the Bible, Jesus promised his disciples that he would come again and hold the marriage supper of the Lamb. Then, what was the most important mission of Christianity after Jesus? It was to understand the true meaning of Jesus' second coming and prepare the way for it. So there's one thing we must clearly understand. When Jesus said, I will come again, he did not mean that he would simply appear in exactly the same form as 2,000 years ago. It means that God would continue his work of salvation through the one who fully understands his dream and his will. However, the disciples never completely understood his words. And then the disciples start Christian history without fully understanding these words of Jesus. So of course the early church shows amazing the faith even under the harsh persecution, and the gospel spread quickly across the world. But over time, the church slowly began to change. Then it became human-centered, not God-centered. A clear example is the Catholic Church, the sale of the indulgences. Yeah. So people believe that the paying money could forgive their sins through the church's authority. So they started to depend on the church's power rather than Jesus' grace. As a result, the church grew the distance from its original relationship with Heavenly Parents and become a corrupt, human-centered religion. So yeah, of course, the early church showed the remarkable faith even under the severe persecution, and the gospel spread quickly throughout the world. But as the time passed, the church gradually became more centered on people than on God. Yeah, so we can see these pictures. So in the corrupt environment, Heavenly Parents could not continue the next providence. So Heavenly Parents started the Reformation. So one of the central figures of the Reformation was John Calvin. So through this writing, he criticized the corruption of the